to employers who are grappling with what you just talked about, if you're in a situation where you feel you can't maybe compete for top talent based on compensation, I'd say that's okay. It doesn't mean you're not going to get top talent. What I would focus on are those other forms of non-monetary compensation. And I would actually think about compensation with a broader definition.
Welcome to this week's As Unexpected podcast, when we talk to C-suite executives, entrepreneurs, and philanthropists about how they lead into the future when the future generally goes as unexpected. I'm Scott Marshall, your host, and my own professional experience has made me a believer that it's not how you show up when all goes as planned, but it is how you show up when things go as unplanned. Given all of their experiences, each of our guests has become very attuned to the fact that the future is not to be predicted. My hope is that this podcast can help all of you become better leaders by building the core leadership capabilities for leading in an uncertain world. Welcome to the As Unexpected podcast. I'm so thrilled that my guest today is Zubin Davar. Zubin is currently Vice President of Business Development and Customer Success for Confirm. Zubin, welcome to the podcast.
Hey, Scott. Thanks for having me. I'm excited to be here.
Yeah. So the first thing I'd love for our listeners to know is, where are you right now?
I'm right here in Los Angeles. I was born and raised in Southern California. And then after a kind of a long early career of moving around the States and internationally, my wife and I have kind of situated ourselves down in LA again.
Excellent. And tell us a bit more about your current role.
Oh, certainly. So as you mentioned, I'm sitting as part of the executive team for a Series A B2B HR tech SaaS startup called Confirm. We are in the business of trying to make that pesky thing called performance reviews, dare I say it, delightful. I try to find those kind of dry problems, if you will, that folks maybe kind of just maybe pass over, and try to make them a lot better, especially if there's an opportunity to impact people's lives in a meaningful way. But as you mentioned, I'm part of the executive team. We help try to sell to enterprise local leaders around this problem, and do all of that. Happy to share more though, otherwise.
For sure. So I think I heard you say make performance evaluations delightful.
Yeah.
Now that would be as unexpected for sure. If you could give our listeners a sense of your own professional journey that led you to this current role.
Yeah, my pleasure. So as I mentioned, I grew up and went to college in Southern California. But since then, I've had over 15 years of go-to-market experience, whether it's leading enterprise partnerships, sales, marketing, strategy across startups, tech giants, and even stints in government. So early in my career, I oversaw a multi-million-dollar P&L and a 240-person division at a Fortune 500, which then led me to earn my MBA, and then 7 years of roles with increasing responsibility at Google. So my time at Alphabet started at Google Fiber. I learned all about the ISP and telecom space. I loved that mission because the point there was not only to provide a better internet access experience, but also could we do something for people's lives? Could we break down the digital divide? Could we make internet access ubiquitous, make it a utility? And I loved that mission of giving people access to information. And from then, after that time at Google Fiber, I went on to various business development roles. Ultimately heading up global business development at Google to scale some of its emerging product areas. My team, we would focus on, entering in when the product was about maybe 10 to 25 million in run rate. And our aim was to get them to about, $500 million, in some cases, $1 billion in run rate. So in that role, I oversaw a globally distributed team of partnership leads, led strategy, highly negotiated commercial deals with Google's largest enterprise partners throughout the full partner lifecycle. And now, as you mentioned, I've been sitting as vice president of revenue, overseeing our enterprise motions, sales, partnerships, customer success at Confirm. And outside of my work, just because I thought it might be useful to share, I serve on local boards that I find have a mission to improve local communities and lives, including the California Science Center, the Los Angeles Clean Tech Incubator, and currently serve as president of my business school alma mater, UCLA Anderson, and its alumni board of directors, overseeing our 40,000 person MBA network.
Well, Zubin, you and I have known each other for a while, and there's a lot of details there that I learned just today. So thank you for sharing. That's a phenomenal journey. And most unexpected, I guess, was this transition from Fortune 100 to a startup. I mean, that's a fascinating jump, but all of your professional experience seemed very relevant to that jump. And as you know, the title of this podcast is As Unexpected, right? And in my own leadership experience, what I've come to truly believe is that it's not how we show up when things go as planned. It really is about how we show up when they don't go as planned. When there's unexpected events, either internally or externally to an organization, and how do we show up with our teams and with our external stakeholders. So I'd love if you could share any examples from your professional journey, which I'm guessing there's many, where you faced something quite unexpected and it was strategically important, and how you managed through that, both with your teams, but also for yourself.
How much time do you have, Scott? I got a list of failures I could go through here.
Well, they're not necessarily failures, right? Just how and things that went unexpected.
No, absolutely.
You could certainly share how you didn't show up as you wanted, but you could also share, this really worked in this case, and I'm proud of that moment.
Yeah, absolutely. You're right. I think actually the word failure is an interesting point in and of itself. I genuinely find, while a conventional sense of what failure could mean in the common vernacular could be associated with feelings of just ickiness, or that really hurt, or that was tough. And just even reframing what failure might feel like or mean as just one more step on the journey to the success that you're trying to get to, I think is really the orienting principle of taking bets in life and taking risks and trying to push yourself outside your comfort zone. I had a manager very early on in my career tell me, if you're not hearing no enough, Zubin, or on a regular basis, you're probably not trying hard enough. Yeah. And I always appreciated that. You got to put yourself in those situations. And certainly a lot of experiences, even at Confirm, at our startup, when you're trying to build something from the ground up, lots of challenges. And I think it starts with understanding that you can't be in a place of resistance. So, you need to be in a place of what I think of like more resonance, where your thoughts, feelings, and actions are in alignment with what the reality of the situation is. So whether it might be your business, whether it might be your personal life, I think the first thing I try to think about when there's a setback or something unexpected happens, and I'll certainly give some examples, is to stop resisting what is and focus what isn't. Stop resisting what isn't and focus on what is. Yeah. Figure out what's in your control and what you can do about it, and then set some goals and take some action.
I love that framing. Accept what is, not what isn't. That's a very pithy, profound statement. Thank you for that.
Oh, yeah, of course. And there were a lot of situations where this happened. I think one of the ones that comes top of mind to me, when I was in business school at UCLA Anderson, it's an amazing environment, highly talented people, incredibly high IQ, EQ folks. And, you can easily start to feel a little bit of that imposter syndrome. Yeah. So, I get it to Anderson for my MBA. In our first year, the recruiting season begins. And I remember, kind of putting on the suit right next to all the other students who have incredible backgrounds that they came from. And I was always just, admired by their backgrounds. And I wanted to go into technology. I thought that, a place like Google or Amazon or Microsoft was really where I could drive impact in the way I wanted to. But I didn't feel like I had the skills yet to get there. And so I thought, the right path might be through consulting. I can build some skills and then transition into tech. So I had never done consulting. I went to the career office and said, how do I do this? How do I get a job in consulting? I said, well, you're going to have to prepare a lot. There are these things called case studies, very difficult. And, here are 100 preparatory case studies. You're going to need to put in at least 100 to 150 hours of preparation over the next 6 weeks to get ready for McKinsey, Bain, BCG, et cetera. And so I did it. I put all that work in. I worked tirelessly alongside my classmates. We had this really great, system to help one another out. And I gave them my best shot. I got to final rounds with a lot of these guys, the McKinseys, the Bains, the Deloittes, and, gave it everything I had. And what came out of that was most all of them were just a giant goose egg, rejected for pretty much every single firm. And I was so dejected. And I thought, man, this is it. I'm done. Career's over. It's been a nice ride. I might as well just drop out now. Obviously an overreaction.
You're regretting that now, Zubin. They're regretting that now for sure. When they see what you've accomplished.
But interestingly, because I had put so much effort into preparing myself for very, very difficult interviews and getting my story straight, I was ready for some other very difficult interviews as well. So I went back to the career office and I said, hey, here's where I'm at. I'd love some counseling. They said to me, hey, what's your goal? I said, well, I've been wanting to get into tech. I needed to go consulting. They said, whoa, hold on a second. Go to tech. Why don't you even give it a shot? I said, I don't know if I have the skills. Give it a shot. So I applied to Google. I didn't expect to see or hear anything back. Somehow I got an interview and again, did all the preparation. But because I'd put in those hundreds of hours preparing for consulting and not getting those and feeling like I needed to do even more work, I ended up getting the job or the internship with Google, which ultimately led to a full-time role and 7 amazing years at the company. So yeah, it was really great learning, and things will work out over time if you're putting the work in and focus more on the process than the results.
Yeah. First of all, thanks for that story. There's anybody who's really pushed themselves, taken some risk, been committed to a process, will have faced a very similar situation that you just described, for sure. There's this quote by Bruce Lee. I'm sure you've heard it. And there's actually a little video clip you can find on YouTube if you're ever interested. And he just basically says, be like water, my friend, be like water. And there's such power in that if you really think about it. That is, you have a direction and you have force, and there will be obstacles along the way, right? And you were a force, you were going to move through anything that presented its in your path. Sometimes you had to move around it. Sometimes you had to seep through it. But that, to me, his quote comes to mind in that story about you finally getting that position in tech with Google.
Oh, I love that. I mean, first of all, Bruce Lee, what a hero to to every immigrant around, especially me. What a hero. But yeah, I couldn't agree more. It sounds a little cliche, but going with the flow, really, it has some merit. And when you're going through tough times, learn from those tough times, certainly feel the feels. It's not always going to be, rainbows and roses, but know that this is not the end, and there's a long path ahead. And that's why I also really love the topic of your podcast, because there's so much richness in the what we consider to be the negative feelings or the things that make us feel down. There's so much richness in those moments of really examining your assumptions, really examining what led to those so-called failures, those maybe speed bumps is what I think of them as, and an opportunity just to redirect so that you can get to where you need to go.
This episode of As Unexpected is sponsored in part by Semester at Sea, a study abroad program for college students and adults on career breaks, sabbaticals, or retired, interested in learning and exploring the world together. Learn more about the Lifelong Learner program at www.semesteratsea.org. Yeah, absolutely. So you get to Google. Obviously, you've had many years with Google and beyond. So I am curious to think about in your professional time. A scenario where you did face something as unexpected. You had plans, your team had plans, the strategy was in place. You even probably had some OKRs in place, and you knew the direction. And for some reason, it just didn't go as planned. Something got in your way. How, first of all, how did you show up in that situation?
Yeah. So I think in my career, I've found more success, especially influencing in moments that are difficult, maybe where I don't even have authority. When I focus on investing in people, the people around me, the people that work with me. So there was an example at the place I was working at last where multiple teams, very large organization, multiple teams do similar work. And across the partnerships org, there were some cases as the business environment, the macro environment became a little bit more concerning that we needed to rationalize, which meant, combining teams, thinking about reorganizations, thinking about maybe moving folks off the balance sheet. And that's a very challenging moment, especially if it could mean your own job is on the line or your close friend at the company. Yep. I was in a situation where I had to collaborate with a counterpart who was leading another partnerships and BD team, and we had to reorganize our functions that would directly impact our team's roles and responsibilities. So sensitive moment, but my counterpart, he initially came to the table with a little bit more of a competitive stance, right? He wanted to prove his team's value, especially when we're trying to figure out like who might have to stay or not. And that's an understandable feeling or emotion, but I didn't maybe think that was like the best way to move into this moment, knowing that a lot of this is out of our control ultimately. So I chose to maybe shift the dynamic from adversarial to collaborative. And my strategy was to, put both of us on the same side of the table, so to speak.
Yeah.
Prioritize the alignment of the company's overall business strategy before defining our own respective team functions and what would be the case there. And so what I did was I brought a point of view on what my team and I believe the right strategy for the business was. And I tried to decouple the implications for both of our teams from that.
Yeah.
So the focus could shift to a business alignment debate, which is still challenging, right? We still have to have a point of view that we can align on, but that's manageable. It takes the personal aspect out of it. So kind of the result of that was that the reorientation, I think, helped us to more effectively rationalize the roles on each of our teams. So it created some space for open dialogue. Actually, I learned that my counterpart, he was planning to wind down his career. He was a bit older in his career. And that was a great insight. That allowed us to create this smooth transition where most of his team's responsibilities could be absorbed by myself and other teams. And we could put him on the path that he really desired without that feeling of resistance. So more importantly, though, the kind of the takeaway here was that the reorganization that ultimately happened was perceived by the rest of the folks that were impacted as being more about the best interests of the business rather than internal politics.
Yeah, there's so much in that story. The first thing that came to mind as you told that story was this idea that any C-suite leader has to prioritize the business over the people, or they have to prioritize the people over the business. And from your story, what I hear and what I also believe is that you actually hold both all the time.
Yeah.
That the people are the business and the business are the people. And if you have that alignment and you live that alignment, then people will see it. They'll understand it. And you can work with people with a really solid foundation of understanding that it's not one or the other. They're both all the time.
That's spot on, Scott. And I love the way you framed it. Well, look, let's get down to brass tacks. What's the biggest component of any company's cost structure?
Yeah.
It's payroll. And so you said it so perfectly. A business is nothing without its people and vice versa. So you have to consider both. And in that context, what's the right way to manage complex, often uncomfortable or nerve-wracking situations that can ultimately foster a greater sense of unity through transparency of what the realities are for the environment, for the macro environment, for the company, but use it to create purpose and bring people along, get people to buy into this reality and solve the problem themselves. Actually, in that story I just shared, my leadership gave me that opportunity to drive leadership of my own outcomes, my own fate in the company. And so, believing in your people to take those challenges on and sort through and get to the right answer is also a big part of it too.
Yeah, terrific. So Zubin, this is a little transition point in our podcast. I actually am going to have some of my good friends pose a question to you. These questions come from Kookie and Cam.
Cool.
They challenge us as older C-suite folks, and I'm so glad they're going to join us on Kookie and Cam's question.
This next question is all about the employer application process and employer transparency. Many young graduates are carrying historic amounts of student debt impacting career choices. In fact, a majority of recently surveyed Gen Z applicants asserted that they would not even explore roles without a posted salary range. Do you agree that organizations should post salary expectations from the beginning of the talent acquisition process? Cookie, what do you think?
I'm going to have to say yes. I think that's something that is important to me and a lot of people in our generation. I think posting the salary expectations from the very beginning is saving everybody time. There are a lot of times I feel like people go through the whole interview process, and if the salary expectation isn't anywhere near what they were hoping for, then it was kind of a waste of everyone's time to go through that interview process, if that's not something they can get. I also think salary transparency is just something that's coming up a lot more nowadays and is something that deserves to be discussed. I feel like it used to be a little bit taboo, but it's really helpful for people to know and kind of have that as a benchmark when they're looking for their next roles, to know what salaries other people have.
Absolutely. You know, just being on the job market myself recently, I was really fortunate to benefit from the policy changes in states, you know, like California, where I'm based, but also in New York, that require employers to be transparent about what their salary range is. And even still so in those listings, sometimes you can find, you know, a really wide range of like $100,000 plus. So I'm curious, you know, we'll pass the question on. What do others think about being more transparent in the salary of new jobs and the acquisition process?
Wow, that's a great question. So glad that Cookie and Cam are asking that. So look, you know, as it relates to employer transparency around salaries, we talked about this a minute ago. Payroll is the largest component of any company's cost structure. So I certainly recognize why employers and companies may feel that they're giving away some leverage in their negotiating position, whether it's against competitors or even just with the candidate in deploying cash from its largest bucket of the cost structure. But I share the point of view that I think it's actually in the best interest of the company to post the salary range. And not only will it save them time in sifting out the folks who aren't the right fit, but it'll also help pre-qualify their candidates. You know, I think,
100%.
I think that they can keep in mind that in this world where some companies are positioning and posting salary ranges and others are not, that not posting the salary range is also a signal.
Yeah,
right.
Absolutely.
Yeah, that might be that there isn't enough salary to be had there, or maybe that, you know, the company doesn't value transparency as much as other companies. I think there's a value signaling here that can attract not just a specific generational candidate, but you can also value signal to top talent across all age ranges. So I think lean into it. I think it's okay. And I can offer some thoughts even around how you might lean into this moment of transparency and still get the goals you want, which is ultimately top talent.
Yeah. Love it. So you and I work for very different kinds of organizations, right? I mean, first of all, you worked at Google. Now you work for, you know, a robust startup, very tech oriented. I work for a small nonprofit. You know, so our challenges in attracting talent will be different in some cases, but fundamentally, I think to your point, we both as organizations can benefit greatly from that salary transparency. Yeah. We have to figure out how to compete for the best talent. Underlying it is purpose. What's the purpose of the organization? Is that attract somebody, right? What's the company culture that you're pulling them into? Is that something they want to be part of? And then it's not just the base comp, it's overall benefits. And how do you approach that, right? And of course, again, as a small nonprofit, we're not going to compete on base salary globally, right? We're not going to go to Silicon Valley and pull in the best talent from that area, given the salary base. Right. But how can we make the purpose clear and the total comp, something that people feel really compelled about? So absolutely.
You know, Scott, it's so well said. And first of all, I need to correct you. You're not just a small startup. You have
we're not a small startup.
Small nonprofit, but you're a small nonprofit, but with a massive mission and a massive impact. I'm a semester at Sea alum, fall 2007. Go Yellow Sea. But I will say that, you know, to employers who are grappling with what you just talked about, you know, if you're in a situation where you feel you can't maybe compete for top talent based on compensation, I'd say that's okay. It doesn't mean you're not going to get top talent. What I would focus on are those other forms of non-monetary compensation. And I would actually think about compensation with a broader definition.
Yes.
It's not just cash or benefits or healthcare. Compensation means very different things. It could mean relationships. It could be knowledge. It could be learning, et cetera, et cetera. So what I would focus on there is maybe you are a mission-driven organization that has direct impact on changing people's lives. Or there's a learning opportunity for a Gen Z audience that's uniquely robust. It's something that they can't get anywhere else. You know, we talked about Gen Z a minute ago. So they certainly have a very real, uniquely difficult debt constraint that they have to accommodate for. But that's not their only driver in how they make their job choice. At least that's been my experience. I find that they are incredibly eager to learn, to absorb, to enrich themselves with knowledge. And I think there's a space for companies that can align with their values beyond monetary compensation.
100%. And we have had great success at a small nonprofit with a huge mission. You're right, attracting top talent. My point is that, you know, we're not going to compete against Google on the base salary. What we're going to compete on first is the mission, and second on that, what you described so well, is the total comp, which goes, as you said, beyond base salary, visible benefits. It is, you know, what learning and growth can they get? What exposure do they get to their colleagues and what kind of quality of life can they have? What's the balance that they're provided in terms of quality of life? All of that matters, right? So spot on. Thank you so much. Hey, listen, we're about to wind up.
Okay.
So thank you so much. The last thing I would ask you to share with our viewers is, what is the key thing that keeps you growing and learning as a leader?
That's a great question. You know, as I mentioned, I was a semester at sea alum while I was in college. And I will say that that was one of the most single-handedly transformative experiences I've had as a person. And one of the things that kind of opened my eyes around was how fortunate we are to have the opportunities that we have. And so I think part of what drives me and helps me to keep focused on learning and growing is just not wasting that opportunity. There's a great Bob Marley quote that I just I think about every morning, and it's something to the effect of, you know, the people in this world who want to make it worse are not taking a day off. So how can I?
There you go. Yeah, we're not taking days off, Zubin, and we're trying to make it a better world. Hey, thank you so much for the time today. Brilliant to reconnect. Thank you for sharing all of your wisdom and experience with our audience.
Hey, no, thank you so much, Scott, for having me.
Thank you so much, Zubin.
Thanks, Scott.
This episode of As Unexpected is sponsored in part by Semester at Sea, a study abroad program where students visit 10 countries on 3 continents, all while taking 3 to 4 college classes through Colorado State University. See course offerings and upcoming voyage itineraries at www.semesteratsea.org. Thank you for joining this week's episode of the As Unexpected podcast. The viewpoints and opinions of featured guests do not necessarily represent those of the Institute for Shipboard Education or Semester at Sea. Hit the like button, share it with your colleagues, family, and friends, and remember, be curious, be compassionate, be courageous. That's what it takes to lead as unexpected.